Welcome to Beyond Ordinary, where we explore powerful strategies and life-changing insights to help entrepreneurs and ambitious individuals achieve their goal. My name is Myles Youngblood, and I am your guide to success. And today on Beyond Ordinary, we got a topic, a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about pornography and the effects that it has on the brain, young men, society at whole. It's definitely something I want to talk about for a minute. And I have Joshua Shea with me here today. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me on the show, Myles.
Of course, anytime. So let's start off with the question of why is pornography so addictive?
It's addictive because it is one of those substances / behaviors that allows the brain to unlock the pleasure chemicals of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, the endorphin family. This is what addicts, and for the most part, addiction is addiction is addiction is addiction. It's all about what's going on up here and creating those pleasure chemicals for whatever reason, whether it's escapism, whether it's to feel power, whether it's to deal with anxiety, whatever your reason may be, instead of developing the proper problem-solving skills, the proper anxiety management skills, the proper stress management skills, people move towards addiction. And that's really what everybody has to understand. The pornography is just the vehicle by which the chemicals are delivered. When it comes to addiction, and it comes to pornography addiction, we can have lots of talks about what's happening in society as far as how the mores and how our standards are at a certain place, and maybe how that's right or wrong, but that's not really about addiction. Addiction is about the fact that you are unable to deal with life on life's terms, and you have found a substance or a behavior, in this case, looking at pornography and likely masturbation with it, and for whatever reason you need it, you use it that way. I tell people, I was 12 years old. Nobody was serving me alcohol. I wasn't getting into a casino. I'm so old that all we had was Atari. What else was I going to get addicted to? It's what was available.
Okay. So you had mentioned, dopamine, serotonin, things like that. So if somebody is, struggling with their pornography use, what a dopamine detox, where they're not, like a hardcore detox. I'm talking about not eating food, only doing water, exercise, and that's it. No social media, no anything. Would that help with them and their addiction?
I would not want to specifically comment on what that diet would do to their system. I simply don't know enough. You're supposed to have dopamine. That's the thing, is that it's not that you're trying to remove dopamine, you're trying to remove serotonin. What you're trying to do is stop the hack that you use. For whatever reason, I need to use this stuff to get those chemicals going. So I do. Here go the chemicals, here comes the intoxication, here comes the good feeling. That's what it's about for the addict. It's not about body parts. It's not about that they like watching genitals smash more than the average guy or gal. It has very, very little to do with sex. That's not what pornography addiction is about. Now, if you're a recreational user, yeah, it's a surrogate for sexual behavior. Absolutely. It's a way to get your rocks off. Absolutely. But that is not why addicts are using. They don't use like the recreational user does. Much like the alcoholic doesn't drink for the same reason that the person who can have one or two beers drinks.
Okay. So I want to ask you what because you have a very interesting story with your personal connection with it, and I believe you're also a coach that helps people wean off of pornography, right? So let's dive into that a little more.
Sure. What I have found is, number one, the most important thing, if your listeners are going to take one thing from this,
Mm-hmm.
is that anybody can be a porn addict. In going through my own recovery, which included going to a rehab, which has included a lot of therapy, which has included a lot of coaching. And then on the professional side of things, I've been coaching people now for 5 years. And I have been probably 600-700 clients deep into it now.
Oh, wow.
I can tell. What's that?
I said congrats.
Thank you. I absolutely love the job. But what I have learned more than anything is that anybody can be a porn addict. I don't see people under 18 because of privacy laws and whatnot, but I have had teenagers ask me for my help. I have had people from 18 all the way up until their mid 70s ask me for help.
Oh, wow.
And we're talking about every color of the rainbow, people from all over the world. I currently have clients in 8 different time zones. This is a huge, huge issue out there. There is no stereotypical porn addict. Don't say you can't do it. You're not a porn addict because you have a lot of sex. Big deal. You're not a porn addict because you come from this specific state or this specific country, or you have this much money, or you were raised this way and not this way. This is like any other addiction. And if I can drive one thing home in your podcast is, if you think you have a problem, you probably do. That's the most important thing. If you have think you might have a problem, you probably do. And there is no socioeconomic label that makes you immune to being an addict.
So,
and that includes being a woman.
Oh, I assume that we're talking about, men, women, all
every year I've been doing this, the number of women who I work with doubles.
Really?
Yeah.
So what have you seen a difference between for why women consume pornography compared to men? Like, was there a difference?
No, not really. It all comes back to not having the behavioral management skills that we need, not having the coping skills that we need. Most of us most of us become addicts somewhere between 12 and 16 years old. And the only difference really in coaching women is that I don't have to talk about erectile dysfunction at all. That's just part they don't have to deal with. But when it comes to helping either way, when it comes to talking about what people watch, I guess the most interesting trend I have when it comes to women versus men is that 50 to 75% of my female clients watch exclusively all female pornography, yet there is not a lesbian or a bisexual in the bunch.
Really?
Yep.
Is there any reason why?
The best reason that I've been able to conclude is that it makes them feel safe. Women can't walk around at night feeling safe because they're expecting a man to jump out at any time. Yeah. And while most of us are absolute gentlemen, most of us are absolute, decent guys, I think for a lot of women, it's a little bit traumatizing, perhaps, when they can choose what they want to watch, to see a strange man having sex. And they understand women in a way that we never will. And what I'd say you don't see that with men, but what you see with men, straight men don't watch gay porn. They might dabble for a few minutes the way you try different genres, but they don't watch regularly. The thing that straight men tend to watch more regularly is the transsexual porn, where the person usually has breasts and a penis. That's what far more straight men watch when it comes to their, sort of gender bending ways. They don't watch the gay stuff, but they will watch that stuff.
Yeah, so I was doing research before, jumping on here. I like to come prepared, and I think it was an episode that Chris Williamson did with Dr. K, and they were talking about how once you like just like how you said that pornography is just a vehicle, just like how it could be marijuana, heroin,
Mhm.
whatever. You're gonna have to do more of something in order to get like that same dopamine hit. And so that's, when you start
Mhm.
exploring into other genres and, you know what I'm saying, a lot more raunchy stuff like that. Have you seen
Yeah.
that in your practice?
100%, 100%. And I liken it again. I often, for people to understand things, I give it in the terms of drinking because almost everybody has tried that, and at least everybody's willing to talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I absolutely have seen that. It's building a tolerance. Now, most people will have one or two beers, and that's all they want, and then they'll go home, and that's that. But person who has two beers likes how they feel. Well, two beers doesn't do it. Then they need three, then they need four.
Mm-hmm.
I myself was also an alcoholic. I quit alcohol the same time I quit porn almost
Mm-hmm.
11 years ago. And by the time that I was entering high school, I needed four beers to make me feel anything. By the time I was leaving high school, it was a six pack. By the time I was 25, it was a case. By the time I was 30, I had to quit drinking beer and move to tequila
Mm-hmm.
because I needed a higher alcohol content. And just about every addiction, you will see some kind of escalation. Pornography is the same thing. I started with magazines back in the late 80s and then
Oh wow.
videotapes, finally got onto the internet. And believe me, the stuff that kids at 14-year-old can see now on their phone makes the stuff I looked at when, in a Playboy magazine 30 years ago look like Disney.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff today is just so much more graphic. And when you start out on a graphic level like you have today, you've got to make it more graphic and weirder and weirder and more hardcore and more extreme and more outside the norm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these kids are starting further along than I ever got in terms of the weirdness I needed to look at.
Mm-hmm.
It was novel for me just to see a moving person after 5 years of Playboys. So
Funny.
now
Yeah.
you've got these, really, really, like you said, raunchy, over the top, hardcore, deviant genres that a lot of addicts, especially the young addicts that I have as my clients, tend to move towards faster than they probably could have ever imagined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have a quote here from Jordan Peterson, and he said, "A regular 13-year-old boy can see more hyper attractive, super stimulus women in one day than the most successful man who ever lived 100 years ago would have ever seen in his whole life." And like when I thought about that, I was like, wow, that is just so crazy how accessible, you know, pornography is. And so my next question is for I think that the best cure obviously is prevention. And I don't have any kids yet. I'm only 27, right? Not looking to have kids anytime soon, but as when the time comes, at what is some things like I could do to make sure that they don't go down that rabbit hole? Because I was exposed like very early. I think I was maybe in like sixth or seventh grade and whatnot. And I think I didn't even get my first
That's
like,
that's not really early these days.
oh yeah, because I didn't even get my first iPhone until I was like a freshman in high school. But now I go back to my same whenever I go home. I'll drive by the middle school that or the elementary school that I used to go to,
Yeah,
and I see kids. Then they already got the iPhone. I'm like, oh
right.
shit! Like you got an iPhone and you like 8. You know what I mean? Which just
Yeah.
means that they have that access.
They have
So
access to the world's greatest porn computer.
yeah, exactly. So what
And
it
let's
like?
be honest, anybody who's 8 years old can spell boob.
Yeah.
And there you go down the rabbit hole. But as for your question, that's
Yeah.
a great question. When I address parents or when I'm on a show that's specifically towards parents, what I really drive home is the fact that a child doesn't come out of the womb feeling shame, feeling dirty about their body, anything like that.
Hmm.
And what we've learned with pornography addiction and having men and women talk about it is that they need to feel safe, just like we need to feel safe when we're young. And someone along the way, mom, dad, grandma, whoever, shames us about sex. So we can't talk about sex anymore because that's bad. We won't go to heaven. Whatever their reason is for it being bad, we internalize. We've got to
Hmm.
stop passing that along so we can have some of these conversations in the open. So when your kid is young, you have to internalize that this is not the birds and the bees speech. That's not, you're not trying to deliver to a 5-year-old how babies are made. What you're trying to tell a 5-year-old is very simple. Hey, you are not allowed to ever take pictures of anybody without their clothes on. And you can't ever let anybody take pictures of you without your clothes on. And leave it at that. And then next year, when they hit kindergarten, hey, when you're in school, you may have a friend who has a phone or a tablet, and they may show you pictures of naked people on it. If you see that, go tell your teacher. Or when you come home, make sure you tell mommy and daddy, because kids aren't supposed to see that stuff. Just like kids aren't supposed to have a cigarette, just like
Hmm.
kids aren't supposed to drink beer. It's not healthy. And then you can make it, 10 years old. Hey, I know that you probably have friends who are starting to look at this stuff. I
Yeah.
want you to know it's not healthy. And we don't do that in this house. When you're older, you can make your own decisions. But the rule in this house is that we don't use this stuff because it's bad for us, just like beer, just like cigarettes. And when you're 18, if you want to do that stuff too, that's going to be your decision. But right
Hmm.
now, it's my decision, and the decision's no.
Hmm.
And you know that they will look anyway, just like we all took a hit of a cigarette or all took a hit of a joint. We all experimented, and they will look, obviously. But by the time I think that your son specifically is 11 or 12, you talk about porn induced erectile dysfunction.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know what? You let that 12-year-old know, if you watch too much of this stuff over the next few years, you can break your penis. That
Sounds
might
just
have
way to
helped
put
me
it.
when I was 13 years old, because that sure would have scared the crap out of me.
Hmm.
But it's true. The rates of erectile dysfunction of men who are 18 to 25 are like 1,000 times what they were when I was 20 years old.
Hmm.
It's the pornography that's doing it. So let's let these kids know this is what can happen. And yeah, you're going to have to say the word penis. Oh my goodness.
Right.
Big deal. This is far more important than a word you feel squishy about saying.
So I have another question. Is that because I mean it's very widely known that porn is very highly addictive. So
Mhm.
why is it legal, but like things like heroin, meth aren't? You know what I mean? Like why have they legalized porn essentially?
Uh, I think that has a lot to do with politics.
Hmm.
And that has a lot to do with the tobacco lobbyists going back to the 1800s, if you want to know why other drugs aren't illegal here. There's also the concept of social policing. The Supreme Court has looked at this multiple times. I think the last time they looked at it seriously was in the 1940s, and they, said we're not going to define pornography. You won't find the definition of pornography in any legal text. They said we will define obscenity, and it is a harsh, harsh standard that pretty much every court refuses to figure out unless there's already a pre-existing crime attached to it, or unless it's just so blatantly against the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, where courts don't want to touch these questions because it also starts to bump up against the First Amendment. And then, just on a practical side of things, here in America, we tried to ban alcohol about 100 years ago.
Yep.
We
Didn't
had
work.
prohibition. We had prohibition for a while. That didn't work at all. That didn't work at all. And that was at a time where you had bad infrastructure. These people were rum running on, brick roads and dirt roads. A lot of people don't know this, but if you trace the origins of NASCAR, it goes to bootleggers back in the day. It goes to the rum runners back in the day.
I didn't know that.
We tried prohibition. It didn't work. Now we've got this international digital issue. We're never going to all get on the same page. VPNs and all of these other things, it will always be accessible. And that's not necessarily a bad thing for people who can control it. Just because some people have gambling issues doesn't mean that they should ban casinos for the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm don't want to get on my political high horse with this, but I don't want people to tell me what I can and can't do. Because, like I said, I'm also an alcoholic. I will go out, or, when I first got clean, I would go out with friends or family who have a beer or a glass of wine at dinner. And there's, do you mind if I have this? It's like, no, it's my problem, not yours. And I think that if you can gamble appropriately, the gambling addict should not dictate things. If you can look at porn and it doesn't hurt you and you're an adult, I don't like telling you what to do with your behavior. Mm-hmm. But I think you need to know what the actual scientific ramifications of it are. And I just don't see practically how we could ever stop it in this international world. We could take care of everything in America. We still have Eastern Europe. We still have Southeast Asia where huge amounts of porn come out of. You think anything we decide here is going to stop it? It's that cow is out of the barn, as they say, or that horse is out of the barn, or some farmyard animal is out of the barn. Why should we bother trying to chase it? Let's figure out a way using our brain to keep the other cows in the barn. Let's explain to the cows why they should stay in the barn. Mm-hmm. The number one way, you said prevention is the number one thing, and I agree with you. How do we create prevention? Education.
Yeah.
Education is the key to the problems of this world. A lot of people want to believe it's something else, but education is the key to our problems in this world, including the ones we're talking about right here. And that's why, if you have a listenership of 50 or 500 or 5,000 or 50,000, whatever it is, it's a few more people who know the truth about this stuff. Mm-hmm. And this is what grassroots health movements do. Look at the history of AA. The scientific community in America did not accept alcohol disorder use as a diagnosable condition until the 1970s. AA started in the 1920s. We know about these problems way before science catches up.
Yeah.
So we have to educate amongst ourselves until enough people demand this to be mainstream.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that you mentioned earlier was about like the person who talks about, or one thing you mentioned earlier was about, the casual user, you know what I mean? So what are some, if someone who uses it, maybe, I don't know, once a week, once every other week, whatever, and they think that they don't have a problem, what is some like hidden, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for?
Symptoms?
Not necessarily symptoms, but what are some like things that a casual user should be aware of? Like what word am I using? Like a con or disadvantage, or what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to find the word.
No, every time I think I know what you're trying to say, you take this left turn and I get lost.
So let me rephrase the question. So
You got a white wall behind you. Get a marker. Draw it out for me.
It's actually funny because I actually did at one point have a whiteboard behind me, and I moved it because the light would reflect and it would shine,
Yeah.
and the lighting
Yeah,
used to
well,
look shitty. It used to look shitty. But so if somebody is a casual user, right, and what are some things that they should be aware of that are some, disadvantages to being a casual user that could, trip them up in the future? Like, I know we talked about erectile dysfunction, stuff
yeah.
like that. Are there any other things that they should be aware of that could hinder their life?
Well, yeah. I mean, and when I say erectile dysfunction, that is not just erectile dysfunction using porn. That is erectile dysfunction with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
That happens a lot, and it makes sense on a science level because what we've learned about people who are addicts is that, that craving for dopamine is best met with new imagery. Why do most people not look at the same porn twice? It's because they get a bigger hit with new imagery. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason why so many people spend extra time to find that perfect piece to finish with at the end. That's a standard of most addicts. And it's because they're looking for that biggest hit of those chemicals. Mm-hmm. Again, it ultimately goes back to being a chemical addiction. Mm-hmm. It goes back to being a chemical addiction.
So you've coached about 500, 600 people, right? Yeah. If somebody was to come to you and they admit, they have a problem, they're trying to get off porn, what are some advices or first steps that you give them to, wean off and eventually quit?
Yeah, well, I think the two most important things have nothing to do with actually trying to quit. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out your must as to why you're doing this. Yep. I drink too much caffeine. I know I shouldn't. I know it's not good for me. But I also know I'm not going to stop if I'm being honest with myself. I know I'm going to keep doing it. So I shouldn't try to stop if I'm honest with myself. I don't think most people are honest with themselves when they start to quit. I think they still want to use. I think they know why they shouldn't use. I think they know it's not a good idea to use, but they still want to. So what you have to do is not have the why should I quit, but why must you quit? What is it that porn potentially takes from you if you don't quit? Have you been lying to your partner who you hope to, who you've been married to for 10 years or who you hope to marry? You might lose them if they found out the truth. What about the idea of never being able to be in a relationship if you haven't been and you're 25, 30, 35? Maybe that porn addiction's holding you back. Maybe you're worried about your mental health, your physical health. Maybe you're starting to become a person you don't recognize, like you're using at work, for example. Whatever the reason is, whatever your motivation is, it's yours. And you have to determine what your must is. How will pornography change your life for the negative in a way that you can't fix?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And use that as your motivation. Use that as the motivation. On those nights when you're triggered, on those nights when you're feeling urges, you need to have something to fall back on to get strength from. And your motivation of why you must quit needs to be strong enough to withstand those types of issues. So that's the number one thing on a philosophical level. On an actual practical level, most people don't truly understand that almost all of our behaviors in life are habits. And they only see the word habit as a bad thing.
Why is that? Why?
Well, a habit is any repeated behavior that has a reward.
Mm-hmm. But why would that be bad? Well, I mean, obviously in the context of porn, I understand.
Yeah, well, because you don't hear many people saying I have a vacuuming habit. You don't hear many people saying I have an orange juice habit. We don't associate the word habit with positive things, but addiction is a bad habit, and habits can be bad, but we need to look at, we have repeated behaviors all the time through life. And a lot of people try, oh, it's a habit. It's a habit. You still have control over your habits and you can change your habits, but you need to understand them first. So what I ask people to do is carry around like a little notepad. And when they get an urge or they get a trigger, whether they use or not, and hopefully they don't, but whether they use or not, I have them write down the time. I have them write down where they are, and I have them write down any major thing that happened in the last 10 to 15 minutes or how they have been feeling in the last 10 to 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Now, if you get 5 to 10 urges a day, which seems like that's the people who I work with, or that's at least how many they write down. Once you get that, at the end of the week, you have, somewhere between 75 and 150 of these little pieces of data. And you can spot patterns in times, in places, in how you're feeling. And you can start to decode and understand your addiction. Why are you using at that point? Because you're seeking the reward of the dopamine. Okay, well, it turns out on weekend mornings you always use. Okay, well, that's good to know. We never would have picked that up had we not put it down on paper. Okay, so now Saturday, Sunday morning, you have to get out of bed immediately. Because if you linger, you'll use. It's about identifying patterns and changing those patterns. So that doesn't go very deep. That's probably not going to be the thing that makes you stop or helps you stop. And It certainly doesn't get into the deeper trauma of why you became an addict in the first place. But it is a place to start, recording data. If you showed up at one of my sessions with, I call it the urge journal. Here's my urge journal. It'd be like, okay, we're already 2 weeks ahead of things.
Hey, I like that how you have them document their data. Data is just so like I truly don't think people understand, not even just in the context of this conversation that we're having, but just data in general. Like there are companies that literally like the whole TikTok, why TikTok was going to get banned was literally over data. Like they don't, you know what I mean? They didn't want the Chinese to have our data. So like, I think when people really sit down and understand like, hey, what am I doing at this time? What am I feeling? And just jotting it down. And that's a big one that you said is making sure to write it down, because if you just keep it in your head, like it's easy for you to, so I was just saying that to make sure that they track something. Because one thing that I found in terms of that I've been really trying to do recently, just in terms of, because we're on the topic of habits, is I'll write my to-do list down. And like I make sure that I stick to that to-do list. Like if I put it on the to-do list, it has to be done. And because I don't want to lie to myself, I don't want to let myself down. But anytime I'll wake up and I'll like do it like a mental to-do list, like I probably should do this or do this or do that, it's a lot easier for me to just go through the motions or be like, okay, I didn't get to that. It's okay. I'll just do it tomorrow. You know what I mean? So I think having, your clients write down in their urge journal it is a major key. And it's crazy because that was actually one of my questions I was going to ask was about effective strategies and tools to breaking the addiction for good. Yeah.
Another interesting thing I do, and I went through this myself when I was in rehab, is to write your life story. Write your life story, pen and paper, 3 pages minimum. What are the important things that made you who you are today?
It's powerful.
Because ultimately the coaching, yeah, we can get you to stop using porn. That's not that difficult, if I'm being honest. The toughest part is not getting you to stop. It's figuring out, why did you start in the first place? Because you're still carrying that with you. That's the trauma. That's the thing that you didn't have the problem-solving skills for. That's the original problem that you've been carrying with you forever. And if you're going to let this addiction, not to the porn, but this addiction to these chemicals that are the only way you can regulate your behavior, that you are held hostage in life to, forget the boobs, forget the butts. It's these chemicals that are the bad guys in the way that you have them. that's again what you have to focus on.
Yeah.
It's not
That's
about that other stuff. It's about the chemicals.
Yeah, that's why I think therapy is just so powerful because of- when you go to therapy, I've been in therapy like on and off for probably like about like maybe 2, maybe 3 years, and it really took me up until really this year to really start like being like, okay, let me like understand myself. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because that's really what therapy is for. They're supposed to just ask you questions. Like you
Were you
essentially
waiting
solve.
for the silver bullet?
What you mean, silver bullet?
I find, and I was like this in therapy. I've been in therapy even years before I went into recovery. So I've been in therapy for 20 plus years.
Mm,
Um, I found the first few years I was just waiting for some kind of here's the 3 sentence secret, or here is okay. So this is the problem with your life. Well, here's the 4-point attack plan to become who
mm,
you want. And I know, wait, it's this person is just my guide. I have to
mm.
do the healing. And
Facts.
it's amazing now that I see so many clients, how many guys, especially guys my age in their 40s or 50s, like show up and are clearly just waiting for me to tell them some kind of secret or some kind of simple instructions like you find, they follow in their workshop. It's easy to
Yes.
follow instructions. It's easy to follow a bullet list. It's very difficult to look inside you, especially at things that you wish weren't there, you don't want to admit are there, or you may not even remember are there and recognize you don't want to find out. That takes a
And,
strong person to do that.
it's crazy because what you just said at the ladder, that was me. There was just things that I just it got to a point where the things that I knew I should have fixed weren't necessarily negatively affecting my life, and then they did. And so I was like, all right, you know what? I need to actually take care of these issues. And another reason that and I always knew that I needed to take care of them, but it was one of those things where it's like, I'm trying to grow a podcast, I'm trying to grow my business and all this other shit. So like I'm just trying to just focus on that. You know what I mean? All this other stuff in therapy, it's like, yeah, I can, that can wait. You know what I mean? But then it got to a point where I was just like, nah, like this is I need to take care of this because this is what's holding me back for my
Yeah.
potential. So let
And
me buckle
we
down
And it's
and do
so
that.
great you discovered that because so many people, and I see this in my dad's generation, they live their lives in silos. I have my family life, I have my friend life, I have my professional life, I have who I know I really am.
Mm,
And tried to keep these separate lives. I made jokes when I was younger that when everybody from my different lives comes together at my wake, if I were to die, they'd be telling stories and everybody would be telling a story of a different version of me because I
yeah.
had my work me, I had my friends me, and who is this guy? And it's interesting that, I used to make jokes about this years before it turned out that this is a coping technique that is completely unhealthy. I just thought it was
Mm,
a funny joke. And once you take these silos, or I look at them as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, if you want to get to know who the real you is,
mm,
you have to put those pieces together. And you put those pieces together that you've been keeping apart so carefully for so long. You let them all come together. And what happens? For the very first time, you see the full picture. It's all connected. It's all connected. And I mean, I think that philosophy is sort of why so many of my clients who started with me 2, 3, 4 years ago, they still see me today, and it has nothing to do with porn addiction. It just has to do with checking in. Sometimes you just need somebody who is not part of your everyday life, who you trust, who doesn't have, a personal stake in how things go, who will
yeah.
be honest with you, to simply check in with and share your secrets and share what it is you need to get off your chest in a healthy way. Like everybody should be in therapy.
Yeah. Um that was me. I knew
Coaching
that.
or coaching. Coaching is a good thing too.
Oh yeah. Oh, 100%. Coaching, I'm a big advocate for paying for coaching. You just gotta find the right coach and understand too that like your first coach it might not be the
No.
right coach for you, and you might have to keep finding a new coach. And it's not necessarily like a waste if you pay for a coach and it doesn't
Well,
work out.
no, you take something from somebody for however long it clicks, however long it works,
Hmm.
and then you move on to someone else or something else.
Hmm.
I know I'm not the full answer for anybody because I am this way. The people I recovered with when I was in addiction recovered this way. And the people I help now, I have never seen anybody not have at least two ways to recover, whether that's a coach and listening to podcasts, or whether they go to 12 steps and they also go to a therapist. Whatever it is, most people have multiple ways of healing,
Hmm.
and that's one of those keys that I tell people immediately. I am not your only answer. I am going to be part of your wellness team, but you're the one putting this team together. I can help, but I consider myself like a Sherpa. I'll tell you how to get up Mount Everest. I've been up and down a million times. I'll
Hmm.
tell you how to breathe. I'll tell you what to carry. I'll tell you what to do. But I'm still only 5 to 10% of the answer. You have to do the true heavy lifting.
So we were talking off camera about like business and stuff
Mhm.
like that. I want to know if your pornography use affected your business, and if so, in what ways?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned, I was an alcoholic and I was a porn addict. I made a horrible error in judgment in early 2013 after 5 very successful years running a publishing company. Our earnings plateaued and our expenses kept going up. And when you give me a lot of money or we're really successful, I can hide the fact I'm a bad business person. When it's tight, that's when you can see I'm not that good. So
Mm.
I made the decision, which was absolutely stupid, and I take 100% of the responsibility for it. I pulled myself off of the antidepressants that I had been taking for years and years for my bipolar disorder. I
Hmm.
rationalized with myself if I took myself off of these pills, which slowed down my mania, maybe I could tap into some energy. Maybe I could tap into some outside of the box thinking
Hmm.
and I could save this company. That'll be great. I'm going to take this restrictor plate off. Let's go full force. So I put myself off of those pills, expecting to be able to figure out how to save the company. And within 4 or 5 weeks, my alcoholism was triple what it was when I took myself off the pills.
Oh
My
shit.
porn use was triple what it was when I took myself off the pills. And I entered this downward spiral of depression that I could not pull myself out of. And if you look at the bottom line, issue to issue, balance sheets that we had,
Hmm.
through 2013, it just kept going lower and lower with each issue, and the quality of each issue was lower. And it was very, very clear that my head wasn't in the game anymore. And it wasn't. I was so ill that I was drinking 4 or 5 times a day. I still only generally looked at porn overnight when my wife and my kids were asleep. Um, but every night I looked at the porn to give myself a false sense of control because the
Hmm.
control in my life was, I didn't know how this story was going to end. I just knew it wasn't going to end well.
Hmm.
And then in March of 2014, my co owners came to me and said, "You're fired." I owned 1/3 of the company, and I ran day to day operations,
Hmm.
but they were able to remove me because I was driving the company into the ground. So I lost my job. The next day was when my wife and my parents and some friends had a makeshift intervention for me.
Yeah.
And March 20th, March 20th, 2014 was the date that I stopped drinking, stopped using porn, and made my arrangements to go to my first rehab for alcoholism in Palm Springs. I left about a week later for that. I was there for 10 weeks, came home for a little while, established, my healing plan, and then went to another rehab in Texas for porn and sex addiction. And I was there for 7 weeks. And then I ended up coming back here and building out more of my health and wellness team. But yeah, this is absolutely an uphill climb. I can be your guide, but you have to know it's going to be tough. Not just stopping the behavior and letting your brain sort of reconfigure, but also getting to the root of what the problem is. It's not easy. It's hard work. But as you just said, Myles, life feels better on this side. And I can certainly tell you, after 24 years of a porn addict, 22 years of being an alcohol addict, where I am now is so much better than I was any of the times that I was an addict. I wish that I had this mindset. I wish I had this way of looking at life when I was 25 or 30 and I wasn't just terminally depressed, drinking and using porn. Life is so much better on the other side.
Mm-hmm. So going back to when you made that decision to get off antidepressants, what would you have done differently? And did you go cold turkey, or did you like wean yourself off? Like, how did that
No,
go?
I have bipolar disorder. We're all or nothing. I just went cold turkey. I probably wouldn't have made any difference, but I should have attempted a wean. But I also quit pornography and alcohol cold turkey. That's how I quit things. Yeah. I'm not a guy who weans down because I can, justify a little bit more. So I have to cut it off. Very, very binary, very black and white. It just has to be none. That's how I do it. And I tell most people can't go cold turkey. Most people have to wean off of it. And for those people, it's just a matter of having a plan. Just a matter of knowing, okay, I want to end this in 6 weeks. And that's what I do with a lot of my clients is create a plan. Okay, well, this week, you use 7 times a week because you use once a day. Well, this week you can use 4 times a week. Mm-hmm. And it's not about focusing on the fact that, oh my God, you failed 4 times this week. It's that you had 3 successful days. Mm-hmm. And you've learned you only have to use 4 times in a week. Mm-hmm. You don't need 7. Next week, we're going to learn you only need to use 2 times in a week. And ultimately, it's not about what the right way to quit is. It's about ultimately quitting, and it's about getting to the root of how you got there in the first place. The conversations I have with my clients are just about how did you become the man or woman who is sitting in front of me today? That's it. There's no magic act to it. We're going to go through your life with a fine-toothed comb, and with my history of being a journalist and as being, working in the news for so long, I'm very good at asking personal questions. I'm very good at listening to people. I didn't realize I was developing the skills to be a coach way back then because I don't think there were coaches way back then. But the skill of being a good reporter, a good investigative reporter, is the same thing as being a good coach, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for that, Josh. And I just want to ask you one last question before we close out. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with here today?
Like I said earlier, anybody can be an addict. Anybody can be an addict. Don't disqualify yourself. But more than that, if you find out you are an addict, if you come to the conclusion you are an addict, this does not mean you are not a good person. This does not mean you are a pervert. This does not mean that God doesn't like you. This doesn't mean any of that. This is not a problem of morality. This is not a problem of ethics. This is a problem of addiction. Addiction is a disease. It's a disease of the mind, and it's a disease because it changes the chemistry of the mind. So understand that's what you're fighting against. You're not fighting against, oh, I don't know why I want to look at boobs so much. You're fighting against a chemical storm that's happening in your brain that is most closely compared with cocaine use. When you look at the brain of a porn addict and you look at the brain of a cocaine addict, that's how strong it is. This is not about you're not a good Christian, you're not a good woman, you're not a good whatever demographic you want to put yourself in. This is about the fact you have an illness, and you owe it to yourself when you have an illness to do what it takes to heal.
I like that. You owe it to yourself to do what it takes to heal. I like that. That's a perfect way to close out. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man, and chopping it up with me today. Where can the people find you at?
You can find me at thatcorncoach.com. That's thatcorncoach.com. For those of you who are social media regulars, you know that we can't use the P word, so we have to say corn instead of porn. And you can find me, That Corn Coach, on places like TikTok and Clapper and Blue Sky and LinkedIn and other ones. You'll find me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll put all that in the show notes. Hope you guys learned something today. Until next time, peace.